Hello everyone, my name is Fam Ngo and this is my presentation towards the networking projects. So this is my proposal. So let's say a law firm called Harry Law Group, their office located in Auburn, Georgia, their business they're focusing on civil law cases. The firm has a total of 20 people across three groups, a legal department which contains 15 standard employees, an administrative department which has two senior personnel, which is the CEO or the chairman of the group, and the HR manager. And finally, an information technology department, which consists of three IT specialists. Their purpose is to maintain the infrastructure, doing backups, making sure the networking devices is working at expected, and also to assist any kind of internal IT support. And my solution to this hairy law group to work flawlessly is to have for the endpoint devices, they should have had 18 framework 13 laptops and 2 framework 16 laptops. Now, why do I choose framework? Framework is a brand where if you have a broken component inside a laptop, you can go to framework website and then buy a replacement. So instead of you having to pay the entire price for a new laptop, we can just pay for that component to fix the laptop. And also because framework also have the ability for upgrade the laptop. So let's say instead of if you want to upgrade the processing unit, which is the CPU, is the brain of the device, Harry Law Group just need to pay for the chip instead of buying a new computer. So that's why I came up with Framework. Framework is a very good solution for any kind of business that they want to maintain their laptops, they want to fix their laptop without having to pay for the entire new ones. For networking devices, we should go with Unify brand, which contains one Unify firewall, one Unify switch, three Unify U7 Pro wall, which is the wireless access point. Now, why do I go with Unify UCG fiber firewall? Because they support fiber internet connection, which supports up to 10 gigabit per second connection, which is really good. For if let's say Harry Law Group wants to expand the bandwidth, they can register with the ISP to bump up instead of from 1 gigabit per second to 10 gigabit per second fiber Ethernet internet connection. They can definitely do that with a unified fiber firewall without having to buy a new firewall. For the unified switch, the model USW48 PoE has 48 ports, and there are 32 ports supports power over Ethernet, which is really good considering we go with voice over IP devices. We don't need to have power outlet in each attorney's room. We can just use the Ethernet cable, plug that into the PoE switch port and plug the other end onto the voice over IP device. For the U7 Pro wall, they support Wi Fi 7, which is very fast. But however, maybe you will consider why don't we go a lower tier, maybe Wi Fi 6 or Wi Fi 5, since not every devices nowadays support Wi Fi 7. For example, if a user using an iPhone 11, it only use Wi Fi 6. We using Wi-Fi 7 because if the in the future if the law firm expand or if they're buying new devices, Wi-Fi 7 will be supported without having to go out and buy a newer model just because they support Wi-Fi 7. For the voice over IP devices, I went with 17 Yeelink SIPT33P model. This is because from Yeelink, they each of this voice over IP device support power over Ethernet cable, which is a good thing. And because the model also have a cheap price, doesn't it usually costs you around $50 to $100. For a server, we should have one physical server that is the Power Edge from Dell. The model is the R730. This server is very crucial for us to host the DNS, the domain controller, and any future expansion, even the file server or a print server, and combine all of those hardware's devices. And this is my proposed network diagram or network logical topology. So as you can see right here, we have VLAN 70, which will be where the Power Edge R730 will be located in the server room. It will has its own dedicated IP. For legal department, we'll have the IP from VLAN 20, that is 192.168.20.0. They will have the ability to both connect it via Ethernet cable, or they can use wireless access point. The administrator department will also have another wireless access point. That's why I have three unified wireless access point, and they can also connect it via Ethernet cable. The next VLAN is the VLAN for network printers. Voice over IP will have its own dedicated VLAN. The guest area will also have their own VLAN, and VPN user, they will have their own IP subnet. And the reason why we need to have different VLANs is because the unified firewall have the ability to prevent guest area, maybe a client that is working with the attorney. If they're sitting at the guest area waiting room, they do not have the ability to print out a paper using our network printer. So we want to prevent the user from doing that. That's why we need to have VLAN segmentation. Or let's say a only the administrator department should have the ability to configure the server itself. So we would the firewall, the unified firewall will have the ability for us to let only VLAN 10 to configure the server. VLAN 20, the legal department, can still talk to server so they can have the service done, right? They can have the domain name system service, they can get the domain controller service, but they cannot look into the firewall and maybe change the configuration of the firewall. Same thing for voice over IP. The reason why they need to have their own dedicated VLAN is because it will help prevent communication from other departments taking up space or the bandwidth that the voice over IP need. And also because the let's just say if a compromised device, the voice over IP sitting in VLAN 40, they will not have the ability to communicate network printers or the administrator department. For VPN user, that is the same thing as well. With the VPN user, if the law firm, Harry Law Group, expand to have more work from home attorneys or remote access user, they can use the unified firewall open VPN feature, and they will have their own dedicated IP subnet, which will help the IT specialist to maintain, and they can help mitigate the security. For the software and services needs to be installed for the operating system. For all the framework laptops, they should have Windows 11 Pro with BitLocker enabled. The BitLocker feature will help you encrypt the data. So let's say if the drive got stolen by some bad actor, they cannot access to the data, which is very crucial for law firm because they contain clients' personal data. For the Windows server, we will use the Windows 2022 server for the PowerEdge R730. For business case, we will go with MyCase. MyCase is a software based, a website based software. So even if the law firm has a internet power goes down, they can still access to MyCase platform using LTE network instead of using the internet. So the software MyCase is very good uh for using because they don't need to have their own dedicated server. They do not need to develop their own application. They can just leveraging what the vendor has provided. They can also use Microsoft 365 Office, such as OneDrive, Exchange, Outlook, Microsoft Teams, and so on. OneDrive, in particular, is very crucial for this business because they need to have a backup strategy, And OneDrive provided the ability to where even if the endpoint computer get compromised and the data get erased, you can still pull that data back from the OneDrive. For the IT management, I go with the Ninja One RMM. Ninja One RMM is also another software as a service product. It's a web host based application. The IT specialist will install an agent on each Windows devices, both the laptops and the server. And the IT specialist, they can maintain that from remotely with they don't need to stay within the company to maintain the computer. They can just sit outside the network to maintain. And Ninja One RMM also have the ability to patching, provides regularly updates to making sure all the endpoints and the server are up to date. For the server, I think the service needs to be installed on the server is the DNS, the domain controller, the DSCP. So the DNS is called a domain name system. Basically, what it does is it translates the name into IP. So let's say instead of you having to remember Harry address, maybe at 1322 slash ABC Street, right? You can just say, hey, can it show me how to get to Harry address? So what the DNS basically does is that. So you just need to type maybe google.com. The domain name system will automatically point you to the right uh location, which is the Google's IP, public IP. Domain controller is where the IT personnel they can apply group policies, making sure the devices are secure. For example, 15 minutes of session lockdown, 30 minutes lockout after 5 failed password attempts, and so much more. They can also limit application. So a standard employee should not have the ability to download maybe a administrative software, or the standard employee should not have the ability to download any application that they like. It needs to go through the IT specialist. DACP scope is where the server will recognize the IP, which is from multiple VLANs, and register the devices onto the domain. So let's say employee A working in the legal department, which I already mentioned, is in VLAN 20. Maybe they will have 192.168.20.1. The server will recognize that employee as maybe employee A dot Harry dot local. For the networking device, since we go with Unify, they provide the Unified Network software, which is very good because this is a one-stop location for the IT specialist to maintain the switch, the firewall, and also the wireless access point. So this is where they can have firewall policy enabled. They can change the switch VLAN or update the VLAN, and also they can also detect a rogue access point, which means that let's just say you only have three Wi-Fi name, right? Maybe internal A, internal B, and guest. If there is a guest two Wi-Fi name exists in our Harry Law group, the IT specialist will know. All right, and that is all for my network proposal. Thank you for listening, and you have a wonderful day.